The summons arrived in a language no human had ever heard before, and yet somehow, every single person on Earth understood it perfectly. That alone should have told them something was deeply wrong. Representatives of Earth, you are hereby ordered to appear before the Galactic Council. Non-compliance will be treated as an act of hostility. No explanation, no context, just a command beamed directly into the mind of every human being alive, all at the exact same moment. Panic didn't come immediately. It came in waves, slow and creeping, the way dread does when the mind refuses to process something too large to comprehend. Ambassador Rachel Kim was standing in a grocery store in Seoul when it happened. She would later describe the sensation as someone whispering directly into the center of her skull, bypassing her ears entirely. She dropped a carton of eggs. She wasn't the only one. Within an hour, every government on the planet had confirmed the same event. The same voice, the same message. And that's when the real questions began. Who or what was the Galactic Council? And why did they suddenly care about a planet that had never made contact with anyone beyond its own solar system? The answer came faster than anyone expected, and it wasn't comforting. 3 days later, a structure appeared in orbit around Earth. Not a ship, not exactly. Something closer to a floating cathedral built from material that bent light in ways that made cameras malfunction and human eyes ache to look directly at it. It didn't attack. It didn't move. It simply waited. And then, a single figure appeared in the minds of world leaders gathered in an emergency session. This time not as a voice, but as an image. Tall, elegant, humanoid in shape but wrong in every detail that mattered, like something assembled by someone who had only ever heard humans described secondhand. It introduced itself as Counselor Threx, a mediator representing thousands of species across the galaxy. And its first demand set the tone for everything that followed. Your species has been flagged as an emerging threat. Weapons capable of planetary destruction exist within your borders. The Council requires immediate disarmament as a condition of continued existence. The room went cold. Because here's the thing nobody in that meeting wanted to say out loud. Humanity's weapons weren't even remotely advanced by galactic standards, not from what little Earth had gathered from the technology surrounding that floating structure. So why would a civilization capable of interstellar travel be threatened by something so primitive? Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a quiet but sharp-eyed physicist who had spent years studying theoretical weapons capable of altering probability itself, was the one who finally voiced what everyone else was thinking. They're not afraid of what we have. They're afraid of what we might build. Nobody had a response to that. And that uncertainty, that fear of an unknown potential, is exactly where this story truly begins. Because over the following days, something became painfully clear. The Galactic Council wasn't offering negotiation. It was offering an ultimatum dressed up in diplomatic language. Disarm completely within 15 days, or face what Counselor Threx vaguely referred to only as correction. 15 days to strip an entire planet of every weapon capable of meaningful defense. All while a species that had never even made first contact before was suddenly being treated as though it stood on the edge of galactic war criminal status. It made no sense. Unless there was something the Council wasn't saying. And there was. Behind closed doors, a small, secretive coalition of scientists, historians, and linguists began digging through every scrap of data Earth had gathered since that structure first appeared. They called themselves the Continuance Group, and their goal was simple. Figure out what the Galactic Council was actually afraid of, before it was too late to matter. The breakthrough came from an unlikely direction. Not from physics. Not from military intelligence. It came from an elderly historian named Professor Elias Whitfield, a man who had spent decades studying pattern recognition in ancient extinction-level events across Earth's own history. he noticed something strange buried deep in the Council's communications. A phrase that kept repeating, translated slightly differently each time, almost as if the Council itself was struggling to describe something it didn't fully understand. Unbounded adaptive potential. At first, nobody knew what to make of it. Then Dr. Okonkwo connected the pieces. Every species the Council had previously encountered followed a predictable technological curve. Slow, linear progress, weapon systems evolving gradually alongside cultural and philosophical development. Humanity didn't follow that pattern. Not even close. Humanity had gone from primitive flight to nuclear weapons in under 50 years. From nuclear weapons to global computer networks in another 50. The rate of acceleration wasn't linear. It was exponential, chaotic, almost impossible to predict using whatever models the Council relied on. In other words, humanity wasn't dangerous because of what it had built. Humanity was dangerous because nobody, not even the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, could accurately predict what it might build next. And that single realization changed everything about how the Continuance Group approached the situation. Because if the Council's entire strategy was built around control through predictability, then unpredictability itself might be the only leverage Earth actually had. The remaining 12 days became a race against time unlike anything in human history. Publicly, world leaders stalled the Council with careful diplomatic language, promising cooperation while quietly buying every extra hour they could. Privately, an entirely different plan started taking shape. It wasn't about building better weapons. That path led nowhere against a civilization capable of constructing something like the floating structure now looming silently over Earth. Instead, the Continuance Group proposed something far riskier. Show the Council exactly what made humanity dangerous, but frame it in a way that made cooperation more valuable than elimination. Because here's the thing about unpredictable potential. It could just as easily be seen as an asset as it could a threat, depending entirely on how it was presented. On day 9, tensions escalated in a way nobody had prepared for. A rogue military faction in one of Earth's most volatile regions, terrified by the disarmament ultimatum and convinced negotiation was pointless, attempted to launch a nuclear strike directly at the Council's structure. The missile never reached its target. It simply stopped, suspended in midair less than a mile from launch, frozen in place by something that defied every law of physics humanity understood. Then, without any visible mechanism, it disintegrated into harmless dust. Counselor Threx's voice returned to every mind on the planet moments later, and for the first time, it carried something that sounded uncomfortably close to genuine alarm. Your species demonstrates volatility beyond acceptable parameters. This action strengthens the case for immediate correction. Panic spread instantly. Governments scrambled to distance themselves from the rogue strike, publicly condemning it within minutes. But the damage, in terms of trust, felt irreversible. And yet, in the chaos of that moment, Dr. Okonkwo noticed something the panic almost caused everyone to miss. The Council had frozen the missile instead of destroying it outright. They had shown restraint, even in response to direct aggression. That single detail suggested something important. The Council wasn't simply looking for a reason to eliminate Earth. If they were, that missile launch would have given them the perfect justification. They were still watching, still evaluating, still, in some strange way, hoping for a different outcome. That tiny sliver of hope became the foundation for everything that happened next. With only 6 days remaining, the Continuance Group made a decision that felt almost suicidal in its boldness. Instead of continuing to stall, instead of hiding humanity's unpredictable nature, they decided to lean directly into it. They requested a direct audience with Counselor Threx. Not through world leaders, not through diplomats trained in careful political language. They wanted scientists, historians, artists, The people who actually understood what made humanity's chaotic, unpredictable nature valuable rather than dangerous. The council, surprisingly, agreed. The meeting took place aboard the floating structure itself, a location no human had ever set foot in before. Dr. Okonkwo, Professor Whitfield, and 3 others were selected to represent all of humanity in a conversation that would determine the fate of billions. What they found inside defied every expectation. The structure wasn't filled with advanced weaponry or intimidating technology designed to showcase dominance. It was almost contemplative in design, filled with representations of thousands of different species, their histories, their triumphs, and disturbingly, their extinctions. Counselor Threx appeared before them, its true form even stranger up close than the projected image had suggested. And for the first time it spoke not as a judge delivering a verdict, but as something closer to genuinely curious. Explain your volatility. Convince this council it serves purpose beyond destruction. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. Professor Whitfield stepped forward first, and instead of offering statistics or technological projections, he told a story. He spoke of humanity's history of catastrophic failures followed by unprecedented recovery, of wars that nearly destroyed civilizations, followed by periods of cooperation and advancement that reshaped the world entirely. He explained that humanity's chaos wasn't simply destructive. It was adaptive in ways that defied prediction precisely because humans refused to follow rigid patterns, even when logic suggested they should. Dr. Okonkwo followed with something even bolder. She proposed that humanity's unpredictability, rather than being a threat requiring elimination, represented an evolutionary advantage unlike anything the Council had previously catalogued. She argued that in a galaxy where predictable civilizations could be countered, controlled, or conquered through careful strategic planning, an unpredictable species offered something invaluable: the ability to respond to threats no one, not even the Council itself, could anticipate. Silence stretched through the chamber for what felt like an eternity. Then Counselor Threx did something none of them expected. It revealed the true reason behind the ultimatum, information that had never been shared with Earth's leaders during any previous communication. Centuries earlier, a civilization matching humanity's exact volatility profile had emerged elsewhere in the galaxy. That civilization had grown too fast, too chaotically, and had eventually turned that same unpredictable potential toward conquest rather than cooperation. The result had been catastrophic. An entire sector of inhabited worlds destroyed before the Council could intervene. That was the real fear driving the disarmament ultimatum. Not humanity specifically, but the pattern humanity resembled. A pattern the Council had sworn never to allow to repeat. Understanding that history changed the entire tone of the negotiation. Because now, instead of trying to prove humanity wasn't dangerous, the continuance group could address the actual concern directly. Dr. Okonkwo proposed something no one in that room had planned in advance. A solution born entirely from the moment itself. Rather than disarmament, she proposed oversight. A partnership rather than a punishment. Earth would submit to Council monitoring and mutual accountability, proving through demonstrated cooperation that its volatility could be guided toward growth rather than destruction. It wasn't submission. It was a calculated risk, built on the belief that trust, once established, could become humanity's greatest strength rather than its greatest liability. Counselor Threx considered the proposal in silence for several long, agonizing minutes. Then it spoke words that would echo across Earth for generations to come. The Council has never extended this option before. Your species will be the first test of controlled volatility rather than eliminated volatility. Should this fail, the consequences will be absolute. It wasn't victory, not entirely, but it was survival, and more importantly, it was a chance. The ultimatum was formally rescinded 3 hours before the original deadline. Earth's leaders, watching from afar, received the news with a mixture of relief and disbelief that rippled across every corner of the planet. But the story didn't end there, because oversight came with conditions humanity had never faced before. Council observers, invisible and largely unexplained to the general public, began monitoring key scientific and technological developments across the globe. Certain research paths were quietly restricted, not through force, but through carefully worded agreements humanity's leaders chose, however reluctantly, to accept. It wasn't freedom in the way things used to be, but it wasn't extinction either. And in the years that followed, something remarkable happened. Instead of resenting the oversight, many of Earth's brightest scientists began working directly with council representatives, learning from a galaxy of knowledge humanity had never had access to before. Slowly, carefully, humanity's chaotic potential began being channeled toward advancement rather than danger. Dr. Okonkwo, now recognized as one of the primary architects of humanity's survival, continues to serve as a liaison between Earth and the Council to this day. She rarely speaks publicly about those tense negotiations, but on the rare occasions she does, she always ends with the same reflection. They didn't fear us because we were weak. They feared us because we were exactly like something that once destroyed an entire piece of the galaxy. The only reason we're still here is because we convinced them we could be something different. Professor Whitfield, now well into his 80s, still visits schools occasionally, sharing the story with young students who struggle to imagine a time when humanity's very existence hung by a single, fragile negotiation. He always closes with the same quiet warning, one that still lingers heavily over everything humanity has built since that day. We were given a chance most species never get. The chance to prove that being unpredictable didn't mean being dangerous. But that chance came with a promise. And if we ever break that promise, there won't be a second one. To this day, the floating structure remains in Earth's orbit, silent and unmoving, a permanent reminder of just how close humanity came to being erased entirely. Nobody knows exactly what the Council is watching for. Nobody knows what would trigger a return to that original ultimatum. But every scientist, every leader, every person who understands the full weight of what happened during those 15 days carries the same quiet awareness. Humanity wasn't saved because it proved itself harmless. It was saved because it proved itself capable of choosing something greater than destruction, even when destruction would have been so much easier. And somewhere out among the stars, a galaxy full of civilizations who once feared humanity's chaos are now quietly, cautiously, waiting to see what that same chaos might build next.